everyone. Welcome to Markets Today with me, Ibrahim Sani. Thank God it's Friday. It's 5:45 p.m. on the 26th of May. The ringgit closed 4 ringgit 27 cent against US dollar today. Strongest ringgit performance since November last year. The FBM KLCI closed 1.66 points lower at 1772 points. And we have plenty to offer today. Our focus for this evening will be on Serba Dinamik and their first AGM since they went for listing. But we'll talk more about that later. Right now, we'll introduce the business brief. Everything's on oil today. OPEC, or the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, and some non-OPEC producers have agreed on a meeting in Vienna yesterday to extend supply cuts for 1.8 million barrels per day until the end of the first quarter of next year. Most investors have already priced in this outcome, as Saudi and Russia both have said earlier in May that a 9-month extension was needed, but for some have bet on the producers agreeing to bigger reductions in supply. Meanwhile, following the minimal reduction in supplies, oil's weakness was the standout feature for today's trading as prices have weakened today. This has prompted a move away from riskier assets and depressing Asian stocks, Malaysia included. Of course, investors are disappointed after the OPEC cuts were lower than the expected number, and investors had bet on bigger output cuts going forward. Some introduction on oil prices. Crude oil prices tumbled 0.6% to $48.57 per barrel today after losing 4.8% overnight, set to end the week at 3.5% lower. Global benchmark of Brent fell 0.5% to $51.18 per barrel after slumping 4.6% overnight. It is on track for a 4.5% weekly loss. And Serba Dinamik Holdings Berhad have successfully held their first annual general meeting earlier today in Bursa. The group received full approvals for all the resolutions put forth by their shareholders, including director re-elections and other matters. Of course, this evening we have with us Syed Nazim Syed Faisal, the Group Chief Financial Officer of Serba Dinamik, to discuss more about your AGM earnings and the plans going forward after listing. Welcome to the show, Nazim.
Thank you, Ibrahim, for having me here.
Of course, Syed, the price for today isn't doing that well, but overall it has been doing quite well in general. I have a graph here that can show the trend and trajectory of the share price. What has been, you guys have been busy. What are the key highlights that you guys have been up to?
We have been quietly active in the market after our listing, which happened on the 8th February 2017. We've seen a lot more opportunities coming in. We have secured few deals that involve participations in power plants, in water and utilities segment, as well as more and more jobs or contracts coming in from the Middle Eastern region.
You know, one thing that, because I attended the AGM this morning, one thing that actually piqued my interest is, of course, your group CEO, Datuk Karim Abdullah. He said that Serba Dinamik is going to be insulated with oil prices. In fact, as explained, the CEO, Datuk Karim, says that Serba Dinamik will be insulated from current low oil prices. Here he is talking more about the story. Newly listed Serba Dinamik Holdings Berhad does not see the current low oil price environment having much of an impact on the group. They say that there is still a strong demand for oil and gas services despite the industry's slowdown. Its CEO, Datuk Karim Abdullah, explained that the O&M, or operations and maintenance, will still need to be done regardless of oil prices.
In a way, we will not be that much affected by the oil price fluctuation because our core competency is in operation and maintenance, as what has been emphasized many times, that maintenance is an activity that needs to be carried out regardless of how the economy outlook is.
Syed Nazim, the CFO of Serba Dinamik, joins me. And of course, the story right now is on the financials. If I can trigger this particular graph, it shows the P&L performance. Can you describe to us what's happening right now with the first quarter performance?
Okay, we have seen more and more projects coming in from Middle East. if you look into our profit towards the Q4 2017, we have actually recorded a very strong growth, and actually much more similar to those that we have recorded back in 2013. I think this is part and parcel because of our penetration in Middle Eastern region, mostly on O&M contracts, as well as more...
And that's operations and maintenance?
Yes, exactly. As well as we have also seen more and more jobs coming in from Penang area that we have actually undertook in much more smaller scale EPCC work.
The one thing that I want to highlight is on the second graph that I want to show right now is on the diversified geographical markets. You were mentioning a lot more projects coming from the Middle East. In fact, as you can see on your screen right now, this would show a growing market share in terms of the Middle East segment. Yes. Is this a clear trend of trajectory that Serba Dinamik will go bullish in the Middle East?
I think what we are seeing now is that if you look into Middle Eastern region, our penetration into Middle East are still quite insignificant into the Middle Eastern markets. So what we are seeing now is that because of the price of oil, as well as less capex investment in the Middle Eastern region, it actually allowed more OPEX investment or OPEX spending that allow us to go into O&M sector quite bullishly.
Okay, we'll take a short break, but when we come back, we'll talk more about the story of Serba Dinamik. Don't go anywhere. Welcome to Markets Today, the special edition where I have with me Syed Nazim Syed Faisal, the Group CFO of Serba Dinamik. And of course, we want to talk more about the company, not just about the AGM, not just about the financials, but also about the business model of the company. We have a few charts here that we want to introduce. One of them is, of course, the key highlights of the AGM as well. This particular chart basically talks about the servicing countries that you are in. You are in 9 countries. How is that even possible?
We actually started back 24 years back in Malaysia. What happened is that eventually we have grown and we have managed to penetrate into more markets. We have started with Middle East, where we have entered about 6 countries. We are talking about all major countries, example like Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi, and also UAE.
And this has driven CAGR growth for the company. In fact, the next chart will basically show you that CAGR growth is not just double digits, but in the high range, in the 60%. This has fueled growth going forward. Do you think that you can rely on the same markets, in the near term?
Yes, I think again, as much as we are looking into the market itself, what we were mentioning earlier is that our numbers are still insignificant to the industry in the Middle East. So what we believe is that moving forward, as long as we manage to actually increase our capacity, as well as improve our technology advancement, we believe that this is a market that we can grow further, as well as getting more and more penetration into our O&M segment.
Let's go to another chart that talks about this particular idea, the business area that you are trying to focus on, including investment and acquisition, including development of small utilities assets in Indonesia and beyond. How big are you in Indonesia, and how big do you want to be in Indonesia?
Okay, in Indonesia, we are looking into a few areas that we're looking at. First is our core experience in O&M. We are talking about a contribution of around 6 to 7% on a yearly basis as at 2016. We also have our own compressed natural gas plant in Jambi, a small plant for us to start penetrating into those markets. And we are looking into further expansion in terms of power projects, energy projects, because if you look into Indonesia as a whole, there's a lot of opportunity coming in from the power sector. And if you look into even Indonesia requirement, they're talking about 45 gigawatt requirement of power in the next few years.
Okay, this would require a lot of capital injection into the company. Of course, you have raised a lot of funds during the IPO. Do you think that much of these funds are going to be used in the near term to fuel this?
Yes, I think what we are seeing now is that we have put quite a significant allocation, about 70% of our IPO proceeds, to all M&A's transaction.
All right.
And we believe that we will be able to utilize this kind of proceeds for us to manage our investment in the future.
Okay, I have this chart that shows the operational facilities that you have. The focus that I want to draw on is not just establishing new facilities that you've just mentioned, but also upgrading the current facilities and the O&M of small hydropower plants. Now, how does that play into the big game of Serba Dinamik?
Okay, we have been looking into a more niche market rather than looking at the bigger picture, especially looking at Indonesian segment as a whole. So from our perspective, for us to secure our position, we enter into more smaller niches market for us to actually put down our foot and actually introduce Serba in the market itself.
The business model that I want to nitpick on Serba Dinamik would be the next chart. This shows the relationship between the asset owners and, of course, the international total energy solutions provider. This chart will basically talk more about that particular idea. Basically, I want to direct your attention on the four core pillars: geographical exposure, industries served, clientele base, and of course business activities. Are you going to stick to O&M going forward, particularly when we know that oil prices are going to be compressed? How does that work out?
We have shown, we have proved ourselves in the last 20 years that we can always evolve. But again, for us, for the next 3 to 5 years, we still believe that O&M still will contribute to our core revenue driver. At the same time, we've seen a lot more penetration coming from our EPCC project. But again, it will look back to our industry, because currently we are telling everyone that we are an engineer. So we are engineering play. So our focus is not just looking at oil and gas industry. We are now in power plant. We are also in utilities, as well as we are looking into other markets that we can serve in terms of international total energy engineering solution.
Is it fair to say Serba Dinamik is not an oil and gas company, but more of an engineering company?
Yes, I think that's quite a fair statement, actually.
Okay, with this in mind, what's next? What's the near term after the AGM? I know first result is important for the investors to actually look at, particularly when you just went for listing, but what's next?
So we have actually prepared a 5-year plan for us to move forward, and O&M still have actually encompassed a significant portion of it. But again, we are moving into more and more into asset ownership model, where what we are doing now is that by using our O&M capability as well as EPCC, we will be able to negotiate to actually have an equity stake into more and more assets. Example, power assets or utility assets, as what we've been doing so far. And we would like to see that this will be growing in the near future. And at the same time, this can help us to boost our recurring income. At the same time, actually expanding our EPCC as well as putting in our O&M at play.
Well, plenty of exciting things to come from Serba Dinamik. Thank you for joining us. I've been speaking to Syed Nazim Syed Faisal, the Group CFO of Serba Dinamik. But that wraps up this edition of Markets Today. What do you think of this particular episode? Send us your feedback and download our app on all our social sites on Google Play and the Apple App Store. I'm Ibrahim Sani. Thank you and good night.